With that, I'd like to thank Kevin and Uche for a great demo. I love the sound effects and the munchies. So they are back there if you haven't tried the cookies yet. With that, I'd like to invite the panel up. We're going to have a talk this evening on how AI is creating what's next in governments. So with that, I want to invite Dominic DellMolino, Michael Mitchell, Vijay Mehra, and Robert Shelton. Thank you. Okay, so I think we're going to have to share mics, right? So there's one there. And do we have one more? Great. So I'm counting on all of you asking great questions that we haven't scripted. But to set the context, I think as we start our dialogue today, I wanted everyone just to do a quick intro. I already introduced myself, Karina Homme. So I guess start with Vijay of who you are and kind of your context of AI and what you're doing in government.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me here. I'm Vijay Mehra. I support a small company out of Fairfax, KYM Advisors. Our focus is primarily information lifecycle management, interoperability. Our clients that we support are within DoD and intelligence community. We actually have some work within Department of Justice. While we don't do a lot of direct AI work, my involvement with AI is primarily around managing the data that actually feeds the AI projects that are being executed. I spend a lot of time dealing with, especially in government, making sure that the authorities and the policies that are actually associated with collecting, ingesting, processing, and disseminating that data are applied as data moves through the ecosystem. So my goal here is to talk more around how to actually better manage your data as you support your AI infrastructure.
Good evening, everybody. Mike Mitchell here from Defense Security Service. I've been establishing a enterprise data management program with DSS for the last couple of years, trying to get a handle on moving data obviously out of silos and preparing that data for use both by our IT services but also future state analytics. And one of the biggest challenges I have is really thinking about getting the organization to think differently about the data need and fostering an understanding of what it takes to prepare the data so that AI will work. Too often I think we go after the technology, we go after the pretty picture, and we're not focused on the fun library science side of data, which is things like identification, ontological relationships, taxonomies, all the fun stuff that everyone loves to do. So I'll really be talking, I'll be a little bit light on the AI. There's certain things that I cannot talk about tonight, but we can have discussions offline. But my thoughts really on the future of AI is really it's all in how we approach, how we prepare the data for use. And we've got to get people to understand that you can't go buy a magic tool. There's no magic pill. There's no IT solution that's going to solve your problem, right? So with that, I'll turn it over to...
Hi, my name is Dominic DellMolino, and I'm the Chief Technology Officer for Accenture Federal Services. From Accenture's point of view, one of the things we're working on is, now that you saw how easy it is to access these AI capabilities, how do we prepare the workforce to take advantage of it? How do we make sure we have a way to govern and understand when it's appropriate to use AI for certain kinds of business functions? And then how do we build a way to understand how we operationalize it at scale? And so what we like to do is leverage what we do from our worldwide commercial capability, figure out lessons learned from that, bring it to our government clients, and find a way to really use AI at scale for the mission.
And I'm Robert Shelton. I'm the CTO of Microsoft's National Security Business, which is all of the agencies in which you need TS and higher clearances. I talk to that part of the government about how they can use AI and how AI is being used against them. And my number one job at Microsoft is to kick Amazon's butt, and that's a full-time job. So
it can be. So, so with that, let's just set context. I think I'll start with Dom. What is your definition of AI? So we have, I'll pick on you. So we have just kind of like common understanding what we're talking about tonight.
Yeah, the easy definition of AI I would like to tell people is really machines that appear to act like humans. They are given data and appear to make a decision in the same way that a human might make a decision, in many, sometimes uncanny ways, ways that appear to be almost equal to or sometimes even more discerning than a human can do so. And so I often tell my clients it's about giving data and having the computer make a conclusion in a way that is very similar to ways you have your humans making those conclusions.
So I think in preparation for this talk, it came up on the ethics around AI. So if we saying machines are making those types of decisions, what are we looking looking at as far as regulation around AI and the ethics around AI? And I don't know if there's a taker for that question or. Okay, great, Mike.
I can take that because you're probably all wondering what are the government people doing about this issue. We've stood up in DoD. We've stood up the Joint Analytic, the JAIC. I forget the acronym for some reason, but they've actually gone and put a set of ethical principles in place, and the department has never really wavered away from its support of using ethical means to extract information, whether it was paper-based or electronic. And then I think in terms of, when I hear the term regulation, I think more about internal policies rather than legislation. So I would like to stick within the internal policies, not get involved in politics, right? But we definitely are looking at what are the ways which we can have an understanding of the ethical use of the data through the entire life cycle and the analytics continuum. So we can track how the information is being used and for what purposes, and then use different types of security protocols to keep people from misusing the data or even the understanding or the knowledge or information they extract from the data.
And so, Robert, I know Microsoft has a stance on ethics, but also on biases when it comes around AI and developing AI models or machine learning models. Can you expand on that?
Yes, so first of all, as everyone knows, our motto is do no evil. Wait a minute, that's not us. That's the other guys. But yes, Microsoft has publicly taken a stance on how we believe that AI should be used. And part of the reason is that when you think about it, at the end of the day, AI is not quite as smart as your 2-year-old, right? I mean, what it's really good at is not falling asleep, taking lunch breaks, right? And it doesn't miss nearly as many things as a human would be. So if you could teach it enough things, it will generally find those same things over and over again. The problem with it from a bias perspective is if you don't give it enough data, it will continuously find the thing that you don't want it to find. And there's a lot of public stories about, for example, one company, competitor to ours, who I won't mention because I don't want to give negative press about AWS, couldn't detect some of the congressmen with their facial recognition. Now, I'm not saying that other companies wouldn't have made the same mistake because Google would have, but is an example of how bias can affect results. If you don't have enough examples of that type of data, you will get biased results, which is not a good thing because people have a tendency to lean on the technology once they think that it's working.
So also one other kind of big picture question. So what's the trend right now? We're talking a lot about AI. I think it's still an emerging topic in government. What are the trends? Where are we seeing the use cases in government and applying AI? Or are we still in the data cleanup before we can actually see AI effectively being used? Vijay,
So I'll say as much as I can. There are two aspects of how most entities are actually approaching AI. It's the flavor of the day, so there's a lot of funding associated with it. So every project tries to have that AI label associated with it. One of the things we're trying to, at least within my own team, we're trying to figure out is what is the criteria that actually really allows you to figure out whether AI is the right fit for the solution. A phrase we've been using in our group is, you can swat a fly with a fly swatter, and you can also kill that fly with a nuclear weapon. Which one do you want to use and when? And how do you decide what is the right approach? So that's one aspect of how to use AI. The second aspect that, as Mike was responding about the ethics of the data, working especially in the intelligence and DoD communities, there are lots of sensitivities around the security classification of the data. Every presidential memo, every policy that is being written is actually asking to make sure that we protect the privacy and civil liberties of the data sources, the individuals who are actually being referenced in there. So there's a lot of work that actually has to be done to cleanse the data, make sure it's tagged consistently at source, and make sure that the policies are executed at runtime as this data feeds into your analytics environment, so that when you have outcomes coming on the other end, they can actually be defended in a court of law, and the privacy is protected where it's needed. So those are the two types of things that I'm personally seeing working with my clients in the government entities. But I'll let Mike, being the government here, bring his perspective to the discussion.
Thank you. I can talk a little bit about this. Vijay's absolutely right. I think what AI is, one of the trends I'm seeing is AI is forcing people to understand data management better, because they're running into the brick wall of using the tool and not getting the outcome. So back to the 2-year-old analogy, it's a great analogy. I wish I had come up with that. But you're absolutely right. The 2-year-old is gonna start giving you trouble if you don't give it enough information, right? If you don't give it enough context and learning, it's gonna you're gonna run into problems. So one of the things that I'm really focused on, which is a really difficult sell, because I'm up against pretty pictures and really wonderful sales pitches, but I need to understand first of all, what is your business need? What are you trying to accomplish? Second of all, okay, in order to get there and answer your question, what kind of information and data do you need, right? And what kind of outcomes are you looking for from that? And then we have to think about, before we use the data, how do we describe it? And so having semantics, ontologies, and stuff like that built into the way we govern the data lifecycle is extremely important. But so one of the trends I'm seeing is that it's forcing people to do the hard work they should have done a decade or more ago. Another trend I'm seeing is, which Microsoft actually displayed very well, is being able to utilize the AI components in new and interesting ways, stacking them or aligning them in different ways for different business needs, and really taking the analytical literacy down to the the actual government employee or contractor level, right? So you don't have to be an expert in mathematics or data science to use AI anymore. And so those are a couple trends I see. One other trend I'd like to see is us, from a government perspective, is when it comes to data, is using more NLP and machine learning to make our data smarter, right? So we're not relying, like the JFK documents, we don't need to have people review everything. We can have the machines tell us, kind of with a risk-based approach, right, where the information is. But this also takes us back to ethics, and I think one of the things we need to think about when it comes to the use of AI is, it's one thing to have the ethical, I'll call it the ethical supply chain from data through analytics continuum. It's another one for the human in the loop, who will, again, DoD policy, we always want to have a human in the loop validating what's happening in the machine. It's a partnership. But we still got to monitor and make sure the human is also acting ethically responsible, or responsible and ethically appropriate with the information they receive.
I'll add one more thing. A trend I've seen of agencies that are successful with AI are the ones who really engage their workforce to understand that AI is now kind of a coworker in their environment. And so what happens is, when we have individuals who say, okay, I've got this coworker, do I trust them? Are they held to the same standards I am? Are they making the same decisions I was told how to make? Are they doing it in a compliant way? And so when I see agencies who accept and understand that AI is essentially a coworker, and they engage their workforce in understanding how to build that trust with that AI coworker, they're able to unlock potential in their human workforce, if you will, and redeploy those people into more interesting, challenging, and kind of problems that needed more human interpretation. And so the backlogs go down, the dirty, dangerous, and dull work that you wish someone else would do. We all have that at work, right? I wish someone else would do this work for me. Well, in this case, a lot of places use AI as that someone else to take care of kind of the rote work. And then when they can trust the AI to do it in a way that's consistent with the way they've always done it, they start to unlock their own potential even further. So they deploy AI much more broadly and also engage their workforce in wanting to do more things with it. So that's one of the things I see that's really cool.
So one thing that came to mind when you're talking, Dominic, is about data sharing in the AI environment. What's that balance between quality, access, and security? That so whether, I don't know if you want to take it.
Yeah, I'll start with it, and then we can hand it down. So one challenge, of course, is in many government agencies, there is a challenge with regard to data being collected for purpose. And so in many cases, data can only be collected for one purpose and used in addition to that for that purpose for which it was collected. So there's some challenge with reusing data to get maybe a better picture of the citizen you're interacting with. So that has to be respected in many ways. So a lot of my clients will say, we are constrained on the kind of data we're allowed to look at or collect or retain. And so that means some of the training that goes on with an AI model may suffer a little bit from not having the richness of data it may be used to in the commercial setting. And so this means you need more specific, more well-trained models. And it also means you need to keep track of the data that was used to train an AI. So this gets back to the bias question we were talking about before. You need to be able to unequivocally state this is the data that was used to train this model. And if it did have bias in it, you have to then talk about how you mitigated that bias. What was your strategy? Did you oversample? Did you do different statistical techniques? And there are places in the government I know that are amazing statisticians, right? Census Bureau, Bureau of Labor Statistics. These folks know how to manage and make sure data is accurate and well-formed for consideration. So you have to think about that when training an AI with that data provenance is an important thing.
And do you think, is that knowledge widespread? Are we trying to educate agencies, the workforce, our partner ecosystem along those topics of what they need to look out for?
Yeah, I think many, I know we have what we've been developing at Accenture is an AI fairness tool that helps laypersons understand limitations of their data when they attempt to apply it to an AI problem. I suspect we're going to see something like this. One of my most exciting things from Microsoft is the capability of AI in Power BI. So I can now predict column values in a Power BI spreadsheet analysis. I suspect you're going to start to see the ability to inform an end user, hey, you don't have enough examples of this thing for me to make an accurate prediction. And so I suspect you're going to start to see that assistive, maybe not Clippy, but some kind of assistive technology that will help you understand maybe your data's not ready yet for AI, or the problem set that you're now making me look at doesn't reflect data I was trained on. And so you're going to see more of that as it becomes more of a commodity office worker capability, I think. So and I think that's an exciting thing to look forward to.
So first of all, Clippy is the grandfather of Alexa. So don't denigrate Clippy. Yeah. So my answer is a little bit different. So before I answer this, and because I do need to be able to get home safely tonight, how many people here are government employees? Few. How many are contractors? All right. So I'm on the contractor side. If the fight breaks out, I'm on their side. So.
And the govies are all on one side of the room.
Funny thing is we're all techies, which means that none of us can fight, and we would be winded if we tried. But that's a whole other thing. So the interesting thing that I run into with the government around AI and the data issue is there's a drastic misunderstanding, and I would ask all of the people who are systems integrators or contractors who help the government to help us change their mindset. So they try to train a model on their data. So at best, they may have petabytes of data to train a model on, and that's not a lot of data. I mean, it's good, but it's not a lot of data. Yet the internet has zettabytes of data. Now, again, we're not suggesting that they bring the internet data into their environment. Just train the model. The model is a mathematical equation that ends up running against their data. But if you want to have a good model, don't train it against government data. Train it against the internet of data, or the larger corpus of information. The number of conversations that I have with government employees who I try to explain that this is a model, you don't care where the data came from, you just want as much as possible so you can enrich the model, and the model will fit on a thumb drive, so don't worry about whether or not you can fit it into your database or your environment. Completely goes over their heads. It's like the approach that the government is taking around AI is as if it were 1985, and it's not 1985, otherwise I'd have a Jerry curl and I'd be a lot thinner and ripper, right? The government needs to think about AI in 2019 terms, okay? In 2019, this is not going to be, AI is not a program of record. If it is, you're in trouble because you don't have enough data, okay? AI are nothing but mathematical models that you run against and include in your program of records. So we have to do a better job of helping the government understand that this is not 1985. Run your models on as much data as you can get your hands on. If some of that data happens to be picked up out in the desert by military personnel, run it against that data, right? If it's something that's on the open internet, run it against that data. Anywhere you can get data to enhance your model is good. And then once you've enhanced it, then run it and move it up to the high side or wherever their FedRAMP environment is. But it's up to us to tell the government, hey, this is a little different. AI needs to be taught, and it needs to be taught with as much data as you can get your hands on. And the government doesn't have enough of that data.
So, first of all, can we find those Jerry curl pictures?
I have them. I will.
Well, let's put them in there with Oswald. So I gotta. So there's so much that was just discussed. That's awesome. First of all, you're right. In my opinion, not my agency's opinion. My opinion.
Yeah,
but I'll explain what my thoughts are on that in a minute, and try not to make anyone angry back at the home office. But first, I want to go back to the data literacy and analytical literacy thing and how we're handling it. So I saw an early need for this, right? You've got a workforce that's aging. You've got allegedly aging. We don't know how old they really are. But but what we're finding is that people are so used to paper and spreadsheets, and they're happy to have their Word document that is the culmination of their analytical product development for whatever analysis they're doing. Wonderful, but you really, as a workforce, don't understand the power of AI and data. So what I came up with was what we're calling the Analytics Resource Group. And what I've done is I pulled together, went around brief leadership, got them all engaged, and I pulled the workforce members who are the most adept at mining their data factories at their desks, right? I brought them together, and now I have a cross-functional team, and I bring in our lonely data scientists, I bring in data management subject matter experts, and right now we're going through an evolution of teaching them what good, effective data lifecycle management is, and what good AI is, or what responsible AI is. And while we're doing that, we're also helping them uncover their use cases and their needs and applying the appropriate types of training to meet their requirements. So I'm not just coming in and saying, well, here's a rote set of training you have to take on data management or analytics. I'm saying, in the context of your mission, these types of data management practices and these types of AI would be beneficial to you. Let's teach you about those at a freshman, sophomore level. So you can start thinking better about, when you go back to your desk, there's a couple things that I've seen occur. Number one, they seem a heck of a lot smarter to their colleagues, right? So they act like they're top of the food chain, and that's in that regard. But also they're sharing that information, and then more people are coming in asking me, hey, how do I get involved? How do I understand this stuff? So we've taken an approach to try to let the business need drive the training need, and then give those people the tools that they can take that information back into the workforce. And what we're finding is they're asking questions like, hey, where does that data come from? How do you condition that data? Right? What does conditioning mean? And they're able to explain it. And so they're starting to build that literacy out into the enterprise. The other aspect we were talking about, I think Robert was on point, is, and I have to be careful here because I don't want to get in trouble, but I agree with that. And personally, I agree with it because I think too often we worry so much about what we actually have and control, just like those users at the rice bowls hiding their, what do they call them, data huggers? I think Minsky called them data huggers. From that perspective, you're never going to win, right? So why not send the analytic capability out to the edge and have it do the work for you there, and then learn from that in an open environment? Now, why doesn't that happen? I think there's a couple reasons, in my opinion. One is definitely we get the blinders on with our mission, and we think in terms of we've been taught policy, we've been taught we have to stay inside, we have to color inside the lines, to the point where we can't even share with the guy next to us, in the cubicle next to us. I think the other one is if when we go out and we carry that mindset out into the open internet, the semantic web, as it were, right? We're carrying that same mindset. So when we find information, when we bring together a person's name, their address and phone number, we're like, oh, that's PII. We can't touch it. Well, not so fast, right? Because we're training a model. We're not actually bringing that data in and using it. So I think there's some discussions that need to be had around policy, around legislation, around the way people think about those kinds of things. And I think that's what really stops people, because that's what I run into is you immediately get, oh, that's health information, that's privacy information, that's not our legislative mandate or policy mandate. Well, it's a different use case, right? So I think we need to think about things differently. So I agree with you at the risk of being fired tomorrow. Thank you.
So I definitely want to open it up to questions from everybody in the audience, being mindful of time. So you guys ready? Okay, let's take David.
Thank you. Earlier, they started out by suggesting that there's a definition from AI. Well, recently I've said it in a number of conversations where AI, BI, analytics, and machine learning are all used simultaneously to mean the same thing. I'm curious whether or not you see it that way, and if not, is there a short way to differentiate the four?
I'll start first. One thing I tell a lot of my clients is if software were still sold in boxes, almost every box now would have that "now with AI" bit in it, right? I've also seen many products, and this is the AI platform for you, and it takes 4 or 5 pages of literature to understand. Oh, that's just a search engine, right? So I do see that there's the intent to say, well, now our software is intelligent, it's assistive, it can do more stuff for you, and therefore it's AI. I almost don't always care so much as long as it's doing the outcome that you need it to do. Is it being able to enable you to do other things to delegate work to it? So is it taking care of work that you previously had someone doing over and over again? To me, that is a useful definition of an application of AI. Whether we call it one of the different terms of the day, I care less about that than how do I govern the use of the ability to delegate decision authority to it.
Yeah, and I would add, you're right, but interesting thing is from a Microsoft perspective or from a company who sells AI, often AI is whatever the person with the checkbook says it is, right? Step one, right? After the check is cashed, then you help them with the definition. But it's no different than it is with cloud, right? When cloud came out, everybody who had a VMware implementation or Hyper-V under their desk said they had a cloud, right? If you're old enough, service-oriented architecture was defined as any application that remotely understood how to talk to another application, and you branded it SOA and got your check mark, right? So it's, as you were saying, it's less about whether or not the person is correct or not. Unless they don't have a checkbook, then you fight tooth and nail, right? It's more about conceptually people are starting to get their minds around what a higher level of system would look like, and whether that system is truly AI or not. And basically, I mean, even Alexa and Siri and the number one Cortana, none of those are AI. They're not, right? General AI is true AI, right? I mean, Google's DeepMind would be closer to AI. Most of these other things are machine learning with a really nice search engine. I didn't say that, by the way.
Hi, Jason Winder with Airstone. So, you know, I'm a cybersecurity practitioner, so I spend all day, every day thinking about risk. So building on, Robert, your point about the dangers of bias, I'm interested in hearing the panel's thoughts on how we moderate the need to kick tires on this exciting new technology, learn from it, grow with it, whilst not ruining everything. Thank you.
So I'll add a little on that. So I often get asked, I often have my commercial counterparts say, well, the government's not even ready for AI. Don't even go there, right? Especially when it comes to the regulation conversation. And the reason I bring that up is to talk about risk management. Back in 2008, the Fed put out SR, I always butcher this, 11-7. It's a guidance on model risk management. And it's one of the first comprehensive bits of guidance regarding how to manage the risk associated with an automatic algorithm that would make decisions. And it's very comprehensive. It talks about managing data provenance. It talks about effective challenge and review of whether or not a model is doing what you expect it to do. It talks about oversight. You know, do you constantly review the model performance? Are you doing testing against the model to do like red teaming against it, or effective, kind of into synthetic transaction? How do you attempt to fool a model to make sure you understand its boundaries, right? And we know some of this in the AI world from some of the GAN type and adversarial AI training methodologies. So I'm actually confident that we have a sufficient starting framework for attempting to understand risk associated with model deployment, model management, model version control, model effective evaluation and oversight, all kinds of cool things to make sure that we're aware of and managing that risk as we move forward with more models making more decisions for us.
So I think that's a great point, right? And with the government being so risk averse to just, give our roles over to IT or AI in this case, I think one of the foundational things is just the cultural transformation that needs to occur. One of the things I've been doing in my organization is trying to figure out how do I get the culture change there so I can get them to understand all those things are needed, right? So I think the first step is literacy. I think secondly, along with literacy is you continue to find those gems in your enterprise that are picking up a little bit faster and bring them a little bit closer to the vest and build a core team. The other thing I've noticed as well is it's really important to have a business acumen in the context of the use of AI, so you understand the risk to the mission, not just from a legislative perspective, but also what does it mean throughout the life cycle or the continuum of the analytic process is what does it mean along the way to my business outcome. And I think if you can explain that to the end user or the customer, then they're going to be more able to understand it and adopt it in context with the way they think about the world.
Yeah, I would want to clarify one quick point. When I hear people talk about AI, including this conversation, most of it I hear is about the 0.001% of AI that realistically will happen, right? It's the Skynet scenario, and everybody knows that Skynet would never get an ATO, so it couldn't run in the government anyway, right? Most AI is going to be, users are already using AI and just not aware of it, right? When I can open a Word document in Farsi and translate it to English, that's AI. Yeah, it doesn't like shoot a missile or anything, but I am using AI, right? When Waze helps me get through traffic, I'm using AI. But it's generally the AI that when we start talking about AI and with customers, or when the government thinks about AI, they're thinking about that 0.001% thing. That thing where I have to specially tag my data and do. Great, we should absolutely go after those, because those are to be the contracts that are worth hundreds of millions of dollars, right? But 99% of the AI they're going to use, they're not even going to know they're using it, The CISO won't think about it, so it won't have to get an ATO, right? There will be no data tagging, right? It'll just be there. When they get Windows 10 and Cortana runs in their environment, or the Alexa add-in runs, or whatever, they're going to be using AI. And there will be no thought behind it. They're going to be just like the rest of us on the open internet, using AI every day and not knowing that the overlord is slowly taking over, right? I mean, that realistically, I think when we talk to the government, we need to keep in mind that we need to spend a lot more time saying there's simple AI that can really benefit you today if you implement it. It doesn't need to be this special 5-year contract where I got to hire a data scientist. Turn on the translator that is in Word. When, right? That sort of thing. So I just want to make sure that as we're talking about the 0.001%, there's a lot more AI and things that the government will happily say yes to because it's helpful and it doesn't shoot a missile.
I think Vijay, yeah, I was going to ask you.
I was actually going to share a personal experience where I've actually seen the meaning of the term AI and AI transition over a 6 to 8 month period, where it started out with we want to do artificial intelligence. And everybody was gung-ho about it. Everybody wanted every project to be AI because it, for many different reasons. Then there was some pushback, and they started refactoring the term AI from artificial intelligence to augmented intelligence. Because we don't want machines to take over. We want machines to help us. So that became the flavor of the day for a few months. The last discussion I had with this group was they basically redefined the term A. It's actually now called automation. Anything that's automated is actually AI. So to your point, I mean, it all depends on where the organization is from a maturity perspective, who the advisors are, where does the leadership sit in their understanding of what they actually want to do from a mission perspective. And it keeps on changing depending on what are the outcomes that you're actually looking for. So to your point about AI, analytics, advanced analytics, they're all very related. It's just scale, scope, and how much of it is actually how much upfront work you need to do to prepare your environment so that it can actually give you the results that you want. But I think projects get factored different ways so that either it looks good on my resume, or it allows me to go after different resources that typically I won't get access to. But the meaning keeps changing depending on where an organization is in their whole ecosystem, evolution.
I do have one.
So one more.
One quick note, sorry. So one thing that I didn't hear was, again, from the ethics and security use of AI. I talked to a couple of people about this just today, but if you think about exactly, if you think about what anyone's seen The Office, maybe you've seen that scene with Dwight is in the passenger seat with Michael driving, and Michael says, I don't know if it was Waze or whatever, but it said, hey, turn right. And Dwight's like, no, you can't turn right, it's a lake, And so Michael says, yeah, but the GPS is telling me, so I'm turning, and he goes right into the lake, right? My concern for the ethical use and the security concerns is the people blindly following what the AI tells them. So I don't know if you know about what happened with Waze and the California wildfires, I think it was a year or two ago, but with the traffic algorithm they were using, when people were vacating the area where the wildfires spread, it looked to Waze like those routes were available, so it was directing people towards the fire. So they caught on eventually after a few people got stuck, and EMS and fire had to contact basically Waze and say, hey, look, we'll give you the information about which roads not to go down, so you can add that to your map, and the algorithm will now be able to understand it. So that's one of my concerns, is not just the security of the data or the analytics throughout its life cycle, but the ethical use and whether it's purposeful or just the people are just ignorant to the fact that you just can't blindly follow what AI tells you, right? I don't care if Skynet becomes a reality. Don't believe Skynet 100%. Use it as to gauge the wind, but don't use it to blindly follow.
So I know we have 1,000 other questions we'd like to ask the panelists, and we have some networking after the event. I think in closing out, the question I had is, What's the future of data and AI in the next 5 to 10 years in government, if you were to forecast that?
I'll take first crack.
Please.
I think it's something that was mentioned by several of the other panelists. We're going to see an acknowledgement of the vast amount of data that's available and can be used to inform government mission. And so in addition to government collected data and government managed data, there will be an awakening of the fact that there's a significant amount of data that can be used to enrich government services. So I'm really looking forward to that kind of space where we're really able to take advantage of that open data set. I think we'll see that soon.
So I work in an environment where the government is still stuck in that system-centric world. So their world starts and ends with what the authority was that actually allowed me to build the system to capture this data, and that's all I'm going to do. Over the last few years, I've been actually involved with a few groups where we're trying to change the culture to take them from system-centric to data-centric. There are some variants in terms of how they actually interpret data-centric, but I think there has to be a lot of work that actually has to be done driving towards common semantic meaning of the data, common tagging at source. Just because a top secret system collected this data, not everything is top secret. Tag it at source to tell me that only 10% of the data is top secret and the rest is secret or unclassified. Unless and until we get to that level, we'll always be running up against this wall that you were talking about, that I want to do analytics against my own data because I can't merge my data with that other data set because God forbid that I'll be crossing boundaries, breaking policies. And if I do that with a lower level classification, I'm going to change the classification for everything to top secret and make more of that data not usable. So there is some of that starting to happen. There is more discussion, more dialogue around it. I hope that we keep going down that path, build standards, use taxonomies, understand the difference between taxonomies and ontologies and apply them effectively. I think that's going to make a huge impact on the fidelity of the outcome that you actually get from your AI engines.
Wow. So I got just a couple observations, I guess I can say, or wish list items. Number one, I'd love to see data being held in the same regard as the other two strategic assets that every organization has, right? People, money, and data. I challenge anyone to give me another strategic asset that is so atomic as those three pieces. It doesn't exist, right? So, because everything you can come up with is comprised of those. So I'd love to see, we have financial officers, we have a need for data officers, right? We have human capital or human resource management officers, we need data officers. And they need to be cut loose in order to prepare our workforce and our environment and our way of thinking for the future. So I think that's a critical thing I'd like to see over the next few years. And just, again, people understanding the value of data, not just in understanding like where it is at its source, but the possibility of unleashing it at different phases of use in the value chain of using that data.
And I think that with the exception of the very specific types of AI that could potentially do dangerous things, I truly believe that in 5 years that the government will be running massive amounts of AI and just are not knowledgeable that it's happening. I think what is going to happen is 5 years from now they're going to say things in the requirements like system shall be able to recognize faces and places and pictures. And it won't say anything about AI. It'll say that I needed to be able to do that. They will quickly, or over a period of time, so let's say 5 years is not necessarily quickly, but in government time it's really quickly, they will get over the use of the term AI, and they'll just start asking for functionality that they see on Facebook. There's 160 million Americans who are happily uploading pictures and videos and information on Facebook that is being mined by some of the best AI in the market, and we don't care, right? But when Facebook first started, we cared a lot more. And over a period of time, they gave us enough features and functionality that we stopped caring, right? We don't care that Google reads our email as long as it gets to me quickly, right? So what happens over a period of time is, as every other trend, once it gets past the tipping point of being sexy, and we move on to whatever the next thing is, we accept it. And I believe that acquisition groups will put in requirements that we think of today as AI, that 2 years from now will just be, well, of course it needs to be able to do facial recognition. I mean, what are we, animals? Right? I mean, that'll be, it'll go from being a question of ethics and all these other things to, of course we needed to be able to do speech recognition. I mean, come on, what is this, 2019? I mean, that's where we'll be in 2025, in my opinion. It's just follow all of the other trends. I remember when no one was going to do cloud in government, and now data centers are being mothballed by the minute, right, as they move to hopefully Azure, but side conversation, right? That was the thing. I remember when email was never going to happen. Now if email is down for 20 seconds, there's a riot. So that's my belief. I think we won't have conversations like this 5 years about AI. It'll be about quantum computing. I'm pretty sure of it.
Thank you very much. This was a really exciting conversation. Thank you for everyone for participating tonight. I know you volunteer your time. We have a little networking afterwards, so please, if you have any more questions, get them while they're hot. Anyway, thank you so much.